What's up, guys?
We are glad to have you. In this video, we're going to talk about some tips and tricks, some techniques that'll be helpful to you as you seek to be a one-on-one discipler or mentor of others. Right? Both Ken and I have been really passionate about mentoring others. We've been mentored ourselves.
Yep, absolutely.
We've had some great people disciple us. Before we give you some of the kind of tips and bits of wisdom that we've learned along the way, there's a quick distinction we need to make, and that is one-on-one discipleship is different than other forms of discipleship.
Yeah.
And so these tips may not apply to other areas. And we shouldn't just assume we want just one. Like we want all the above. Right? So there's informal small groups, there's formal small groups, right? Or community groups, or elevate groups, or DNA groups, or
cell groups,
right?
life groups.
There's a bajillion names for them out there. Then there's like Bible classes, right? Or Sunday school classes, kind of that traditional format. Of course, you've got congregational discipleship, where a pastor is leading, from Sunday morning preaching, or there's church-wide initiatives, right? There's all different genres or types of discipleship. But in this video, we are specifically talking about the one-on-one, the one person sitting with one person, hanging out, spending time, sitting across the table, eyeball to eyeball.
Kind of what we're doing right now.
Exactly.
Cameras.
Exactly. We're pretending you're not there. But that sort of idea. Yeah. So, Ken, give us maybe one tip on how do you be more effective in one-on-one discipleship.
Yeah, I think the first tip that you should be aware of is that you have to be willing to spend a lot of time with people.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes we think it's just going to be this one-off meeting here and there. No, if you're really going to do one-on-one discipleship, you got to spend a lot of time with people.
Yeah. I think whatever amount of time you think it's going to be, it's way more than that.
It's like double it.
At minimum, maybe 10 times. Like, I just think in general, people think, I'll sit down with someone. I've heard this. I've heard parents say this actually about their teenagers when I was a youth pastor. They'll say something like, well, I told them that one day not to do that thing. And I'm like, that doesn't work. Right? Like, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
In fact, it's same, in the classroom here at, we work at Bethany Global University, and I had a student recently say to me, Kenny, it feels like you say the same things over and over again to our class. And I'm like, yeah, because some people are still not getting it, even though I've said it literally 12 times. And that's okay. Like, people are not flawed because they don't get it the first time.
Yeah.
Which means we as disciplers, as the mentors, we must be willing to spend lots and lots and lots and lots of time repeating the same things over and over and over and over again. Ultimately, because if you don't do that, you're just not going to be effective. They're not going to get it.
Yeah.
So give us another tip, Ken, in your mind.
Yeah, I think it goes along with this one, right? As you're giving one-on-one time, sometimes the one-on-one is not necessarily just sitting next to each other like this,
right.
But it's also allowing the person into your life.
Right.
Right, where the person learns what you're doing. So for example, I'm renovating my basement. Sometimes I ask some students if they want to come hang out. They want to be mentored. I'm like, hey, do you want to come hang out with me while I am demoing my basement, right? Mm-hmm. Or I'm eating lunch with my kids, and I'm like, hey, do you want to join me for lunch with my kids? Because that's where true mentorship and discipling happens one-on-one. It's not just drinking coffee or whatever it is, sitting here. It's them seeing how I live my life. Yep. How has Christ transformed me in such a way that they now have a good example of what that looks like? Because I could say a lot of great words, but they need to see my life in action.
Yeah, and if you're going to spend a lot of time, right? Again, we just mentioned, like, if you're going to be a great mentor, you have to spend a lot of time with someone, and that's not always convenient. You can't just go sit at Starbucks and have a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
Some great examples. I know you had mentioned your pastor. You're an elder at a local church here in Minneapolis. Your pastor a couple years ago, when you first were part of the church, he was going to go preach at a conference or teach at a seminar, and he just said, hey, Ken, why don't you come with me? And he invited some guys. Like, he's already doing it. He's inviting you to come into his life.
Yeah.
Or you're doing your basement, and you're telling some young guys you want to mentor, hey, just come on over, come hang out. It's inconvenient for you, and it can be a little awkward for them.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if the only time you mentor people is when you carve out time, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? You got a wife, you got kids, you got a full-time job, you're an elder, you got lots of responsibilities. It's just not realistic. Another great example, when I was in high school, my youth pastor used to say, hey, I remember he called me one day, hey, Kenny, I'm going to go run some errands all day. You want to come with me? And I got to do this drive. And I just hopped in the car with my youth pastor. He actually picked me up. And then I hung out with him for like 5-6 hours. He went to the post office. And he went grocery shopping. Like, he was hanging out with me as we were just doing stuff. And I think the key there, though, if you're the discipler, you're the mentor, you have to be willing to allow your life to be inconvenienced.
Yeah.
Right? And another way to do this is in ministry context. Last Friday night, I went laser tag with a couple high school and middle school guys from our church. And then there's a guy in his 20s that I want to mentor, this guy Pete. And I say, hey, Pete, why don't you come hang out with me? I'm going to bring you in kind of as the assistant leader for the youth but really I have kind of almost a hidden agenda, not malicious, but like I actually want to mentor him, while I also want him to get involved in leadership and leading the young youth as well. So you can be really strategic in how you do that. And that leads to the third tip we're going to mention. That's being very intentional. You got to be willing to spend a lot of time. You have to be willing to allow others into your life, even if it's extremely inconvenient. But you have to be extremely intentional. You have to go out of your way. Discipleship just doesn't happen by itself.
Yeah, I think, some of the questions that I think about when I start discipling someone one-on-one is like, how does God see this individual, and where does God want this person to go?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I am praying, I'm interceding, I am looking at what gifts this individual has, and I'm being very intentional in discipling that person to where I believe the Lord is leading him to. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm flawed, I might be wrong, and the individual himself will tell me, hey, I think this is where the Lord is guiding me. Okay, well, let's be really intentional by that. Mm-hmm. So I'm specifically intentional with their life purpose, right, where God has taken them, but I'm also intentional sometimes as just hanging out as friends is like, hey, what book are we going through? Like, it's not just us sitting down, hanging out one-on-one, but like there's a plan, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's a struggle that they may be going through or something that they're trying to achieve. I'm trying to be very intentional with that. Sometimes it's just getting in the Word, right? Like, we are going through a book of the Bible together because we are trying ultimately to become more like Jesus Christ. And the best way to do that is to open the Word of God and let the Word dissect us and pierce our hearts.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is basically you're going to spend a lot of time with people. You're going to allow them into your life. Yeah. But then when you're in that moment, you're just not going to do it by accident. You already have a plan in your mind.
Absolutely.
As to where you want that conversation to go. Or maybe you have a general trajectory. Okay, over the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, here's the types of things I want to be talking about with this person. Yeah. And I may not talk about it every single time we meet, but in general, I want to be kind of pushing towards something, right? Yeah. Or I want to foster conversation where certain things are going to come up in conversation.
Yep, absolutely.
And you mentioned life purpose. That's a great one that a lot of youth and young adults really want to have that talk. They want to have that talk. How do I decide what to do with my life? And you're really good. I've seen you do this many times with students, of really having conversation and helping students figure out what really is their life purpose. What are they really gifted and talented to do? So it's really great.
Yeah, the next one is practice active listening.
Yeah, it's good.
I think to have a truly successful one-on-one is practicing really good listening. And it's not just like, oh yeah, I hear you, I got you, but like there's some basic tips to it, right? Like making sure that you have an open posture, that you have good eye contact with the individual, that you're nodding your head every once in a while. I think the biggest key to active listening is repeating back their facts and the feelings that they're communicating to you. Mm-hmm. In order to do that, right, you have to be not thinking about your next response. You have to be fully engaged in what they're listening. Kenny, I think you're an excellent listener. I've listened to your podcast, the way you're processing information with people, and just the way you keep a conversation going. I'm just like, wow, you are constantly practicing active listening. Yeah. So I think it's extremely important to have a successful one-on-one, because at the end of the day, people feel extremely valued, extremely cared for when they feel heard.
Man, that's a great point. I mean, it's so amazing. I think so many people live our lives in a society where people are actually not listening to us. We feel disenfranchised, we feel neglected or ignored. And if you listen to someone, the thing you mentioned a moment ago I think is really important and people should really not miss is the repeat back. Yeah. I remember having a conversation with a teenager, probably 13 or 14, and he was feeling like his mom wasn't listening to him, like his mom didn't care about him. Basically, that was his sentiment. And so he said to me, he goes, man, I just feel like my mom doesn't care, she never listens to me. And I literally looked at him and I just said, wow. So you're saying you feel like your mom doesn't really care about you and she doesn't really listen? He's like, yeah.
And I'm finally, someone hears me. And someone knows what's going on.
I literally just repeated what he said. And then I just shut up. And then he just talked for like another 3 or 4 minutes. And what I later found out was his mom certainly did care, but there was some friction in the relationship that I could help guide him through. But me just listening, repeating back, and then shutting up, and then him talking for another 3 or 4 minutes, opened the door for some of that later counseling. Yeah. And so I think that's a really great point that I think we can all really get better at in some ways.
Absolutely. I feel like I have to get better at that too. Which brings us to the next one, right? Is as you're active listening, sometimes people bring up certain things and they might be disappointed or downtrodden or something like that. One great successful tip when it comes to that is just be very encouraging. Yeah. I mean, everyone needs to be encouraged. Yep. Even there's some people who are like, I'm not words of affirmation. I don't really like to be encouraged. Even those people need encouragement too.
Everyone does, right?
Right? And the reason why I think about that is that the scriptures say, like, make sure, Hebrews 10:24-25, that we are daily meeting with one another, encouraging one another because the day is drawing near. right? So it's not saying, hey, because of your personality type, you need encouragement. It's saying everyone as the body of Christ, we need encouragement. We need to be uplifted because sometimes we just get beat down, whether it's life, whether it's society, whether it's the enemy attacking us. We need someone there who is supporting us, thinking through whatever's going on in our lives.
Yeah, I agree. We all desperately need encouragement, way more than you think you need it. And particularly if you're a manager or a leader, if you're discipling a group of people, whatever amount of encouragement you think they need, it's 5 times that. All right. Just when you have done enough, you think you're like, oh, I'm sick of encouraging them, you probably have just barely scratched the surface of what they actually need.
Yeah.
One quick tip that I think is really helpful for encouragement: encourage people's choices, not just their natural state of being or talent. So, for example, don't just look at someone and say, "Oh man, you're a really good speaker." Okay, like that's good, but you may have just been born with a natural communication skill.
Yeah.
Rather, I would say, Ken, man, I want to really encourage you. You made a choice to really work hard to get better at public speaking. That sermon you preached was great, and I saw how you worked hard. You prepared for that sermon really well.
Yeah.
So I'm praising a specific attribute. I remember some of the young guys in my young adult ministry, in my college ministry, when I was in that ministry, some guys were talking about in their dating relationships. I told them, don't tell a girl she's pretty. Everyone tells her that. Tell her that you like her choice in how she presents herself or how she did her hair that day, right? So I'm just giving dating advice here in Just Disciple.
There you go.
You get everything here.
Dating
Just Disciple, right? But like really, like rather than just choosing to say, hey, praising someone on what they can't control, you're praising them on a choice they made that was in their control. That is dramatically more impactful when you are encouraging people.
Yeah. The other thing that's huge about encouragement too is like, how does that encouragement tie to glorifying God?
Yeah.
Right, and that they're exalting God. So sometimes when I encourage people in their giftings, I'm saying, hey, look at what God has gifted you in. Yeah. And that does 2 things. One, it shows them that they have that gifting, and it's also not just a natural talent that they might have come up with or a skill set that they've grown up with, but it's God himself who's bestowed that. And now I am speaking life into that individual because I'm showing them that this is how God potentially created it.
Yeah, it's a great point. The next thing I want to mention is if you're going to be a great discipler, you have to be willing to be challenging. This is a harder one, and definitely you want to make sure you are encouraging more than you're challenging.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
If you're giving critical feedback to people more often than you're encouraging them, then you're doing it wrong. And I've certainly been very guilty of that many times in my life.
Every day.
And so we definitely, across the board, I would say evangelical Christians in America, North America, I give us about a D- in how good we are at encouraging. I give us a straight F at how good we are at challenging. All right, we're a D- in encouragement, so we definitely got to get better at that.
Wow.
But I think American Christians as a whole fail miserably at confronting one another effectively.
Yeah,
that's a good point. You may want to call people out, particularly on social media, which is the worst way to do it.
Yeah. Social justice warrior all of a sudden.
But I think we need to be willing to challenge people. If I'm sitting across the table with a friend of mine having dinner, they've got broccoli in their teeth, and I don't say something to them, I'm a bad friend. Okay? Yeah. If you're sitting across the table and someone has something in their teeth and you have not told them, you're a bad friend to that person. That person, how many times I know it's happened to me, I've gotten home, got something in my teeth, and I think, why didn't no one tell me? Because they were embarrassed. And you have to be willing to push past the awkwardness and the embarrassment, because ultimately it's a form of selfishness. Yeah. You're more worried about your own embarrassment and your own lack of courage in the moment than you are concerned about the good of that person. And I use broccoli in the teeth as a silly example, but we've all seen people in our lives, friends, family, spouse, children, pastor, whatever, someone that we know that has something in their life that we know is harmful for them, but we don't say anything.
Yeah.
And if you refuse to say something, sometimes definitely you want to just maybe pull back. But most of the time you want to engage in a way that's gentle and kind and loving. But not saying something really is a lack of love. So thoughts on that, Ken?
Yeah, I think, sometimes people are like, how do I be challenging? I think one of the simplest things that I have done in one-on-one dynamics is just simply asking for permission. And good. I'm sitting down with someone and I'm just like, hey, I got to bring up a sensitive subject or a difficult topic. Do I have permission to address this with you? And what ends up happening. If you ask that question, the person across from you, their stomach's going to drop a little bit. It's going to be like, oh gosh, what's going to happen? But at least now, if they say yes, right, they're at least a little bit more receptive because you've asked for permission. Mm-hmm. Where sometimes people just get blindsided, and when they get blindsided, they get defensive real fast.
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure that you are asking for permission. Yeah. And the next thing that I would say is that make sure your heart is for restoration, or that they would become whole and become more like Christ, and whatever the topic is that you're challenging them with. Sometimes I ask the question, like, is this a convictional issue or is this just a preference issue? Obviously the broccoli thing, I would probably put that in the convictional issue, because I don't want this person walking around with something in their teeth. But sometimes you might be frustrated about a situation and it's just preference. Yeah. Right. But I try to be very aware of, like, is this something, when this person is engaging with other people, is it defaming the name of God?
Yeah.
And if it's defaming the name of God, I want to make sure that I come in, I step in, and I'm challenging that in a good way so that they can conform to the Word of God.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The permission, and then you're looking for the best of that person, right? So you say to the person, I've even said this to people, said, hey, hey, Billy, if I noticed something in you, would you want me to say something? Or is it better if I hold back and just go pray?
Yeah, that's great.
And I just want to be, hey, I'm genuinely asked that. Be very humble, come across with a meek attitude. But I've had people say, you know what, I'd rather you not say anything, just pray for me. And great, you know what, I'm going to go pray for you. And then actually go pray for them, right? But I think the last point you made, I think, is really, really great. And the illustration I've heard people use is, if someone is sitting on a train track and a train is coming, what you don't say to them is, say, hey, you are sitting wrongly on this train track. You're an idiot. I can't believe you're sitting on a train track. They feel defensive. They feel defensive. They feel like they're being attacked. What you're doing is wrong. You are flawed. It feels like you don't care about them. Instead, the angle is, hey, because I care about you, I don't want you to get hit by a train. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a train coming, and if you stay where you are, the train is going to hit you, and it's going to derail you. So now I'm no longer talking about what you have done wrong, but now I'm actually talking about the circumstance that might derail you, and how I'm calling upon you to do something different, which is now, in this silly metaphor, get off the train track. Right? Yeah. It's the exact opposite of the encouragement. I specifically want to hone in on something you have chosen to do.
Stay in the train track.
Exactly. Right?
That's a bad idea.
So the encouragement, I want to specifically hone in on a choice you made that I'm praising. With confrontation or challenging, I literally am doing the opposite. Yeah. I'm not honing in on something you did that feels too personal. I'm talking about the circumstance and how you have an opportunity to choose to do something different to reach your full potential. Yeah, it's a different ideology there.
Yeah. Goes to the next thing, right? So far we've been talking about practicing active listening, encouraging, challenging. Another tip that we have is just have a regular schedule.
Yeah.
Right? If you're going to meet with this individual, have a regular, consistent schedule. I think it becomes really difficult for the individual if all of a sudden you're like, hey, let's meet Monday this week, then next week let's meet Saturday, then the next week after that meet some other time. Oh, you know what, let's cancel the meeting, right? Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that it's consistent, that they know that they can trust in you to sit down and kind of be that sounding board with the individual.
I agree 100%. I mean, with all of the things we've been talking about, these are things you want to be doing in one-on-one mentorship, one-on-one discipleship settings. But that is impossible to do any of these things if you're not meeting regularly. Yeah. And so anytime I'm meeting with guys, one guy at my church right now will say, hey, we're going to get together every other Thursday morning. And that's the schedule. The pastor, the lead pastor of our church where I'm on staff, he says, hey, we're going to meet every other Monday. Our entire church staff, every other Monday afternoon, we're going to get together. We have a regular rhythm of meeting together because it helps build the momentum.
Yeah, that's awesome. The next thing another tip for us is discern what that person needs at the moment.
Right.
And
this is so important.
Here's what I think about is that whenever you're sitting with someone, you need to know, like, do they need to be encouraged? Do they need to be challenged? What needs to happen? Sometimes the way I like to think about it is, do you need to be a counselor right now at this moment, or do you need to be a coach? Right? As a counselor, you're focused on restoration for the individual because they're probably struggling with sin, some habitual things, or just life suffering is going on with the individual. So you want to help bring restoration to that person. If you don't have the counselor hat on, you might have your coach hat on, where it says like, hey, I'm trying to help this person now achieve a goal. What's the goal? Where are we trying to go with this person? So I try to discern, what does this person need at the moment? And there's a ton of different things within scripture that talks about what sometimes people may need, right? Sometimes they may need comfort, which brings my counselor hat on, right? So you're just trying to figure out what exactly does this individual need, right? Because that's going to keep them wanting to come back.
Man, it's a really great point. Don't assume that they need the same thing every time.
Absolutely not.
Right. That's a great point. The last thing I would say is if you're going to be a great one-on-one discipler, is take notes.
Yeah.
Literally, every time I meet with someone, I walk out, I got a file on my phone. I actually have an app that does this, but there's a lot of different apps and different ways you can do this, even with a simple note file on your phone. And I just take notes.
Yeah.
I go, hey, just met with Jimmy today, met with Frank today. Here's what we talked about. Here's what I challenged them with. Here's what he said. Just like a one paragraph description, because I'm not going to remember.
Yeah. We got 1,000 things going on throughout the day. You're not going to remember those things.
We actually, at our church, we have in our database, every time one of the pastors or church leaders meets with a congregant, that person logs into the database and takes quick notes on that. You want to be sensitive. You don't say anything that's demeaning, or you don't want to release
or breaking confidentiality
exactly.
or anything like that.
But just generally, so whenever I go have lunch with someone, I just go read through the notes. Oh, okay. Pastor Jonathan met with this guy, or Pastor Mike met with this guy. Like, just so that I have some semblance of understanding. Or that I can call and go, hey, Pastor so-and-so, I see that you met with this guy 6 months ago. What's happened in the intervening times? And he can go, oh, you need to know this before you walk into that meeting. Or he can give you some insights. It's just really helpful to just have some system of keeping notes. I once heard this saying from a guy we used to work with at another organization. And he said, a short pencil is better than a long memory.
And it's true. It's true, and it happens. That's so silly, but
it's good.
Right? And I think there's something really important that you said that I don't want people to lose track of. Is that the reason why you keep notes is because you want to be able to look back at them and follow up when you come with the next conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how many times there have been times when I've been in a meeting with someone and I recall a specific individual. They're asking me questions, and it's the same questions I answered. Right. The last time we met. So I'm just kind of like, we're both wasting our time here because you're asking me the same things. And the individual just forgot that he asked me those questions, which is okay. But like, if you want effective, good one-on-ones, it shows a ton when you're like, hey, do you remember last time we talked about this? Let's address it again.
Yep.
How are you doing with this? Right?
Keep good notes.
Follow up. So keep really good, thorough notes with your people.
Yeah, it's really great. Last thing I'll mention is not necessarily a tip or technique, and that is just the expectation that all Christians are engaging in one-on-one discipleship. Yeah. We didn't really say it off the top. We're giving you tips and techniques. We're giving you wisdom and thoughts that we've learned throughout the years because we believe that you're going to be doing this. Yeah. And so if you are a Christian that has never engaged in mentorship or discipleship, I want to encourage you, challenge you, exhort you, go find someone in your life and go invest yourself in them. Go use these tips and techniques, this wisdom in your discipleship one-on-one, because every Christian ought to be doing this to some extent in their life.
Yeah. With that, this is our video on how to disciple people one-on-one and successful tips. So hopefully you guys found this helpful, and we will see you next time.